The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, in this half hour, I'll talk with jazz singer Dominique Eade, rock star Dweezil Zappa, and comedian Vicki Lawrence, who is bringing Mama Thelma Harper to town to share her special kind of sunshine. Those stories are all next on Arizona Spotlight. I have a confession to make. I fell in love with a song in 1995, and I'll never let it go. Jazz singer Dominique Eade found an old Hoagie Carmichael and Harold Adamson tune called My Resistance is Low that few people remember. She rearranged it, slowed it down, and made it one of the best love ballads I've ever heard. When I found out that Dominique Eade was coming to Tucson for her first time to headline the opening night of the 2025 Tucson Jazz Festival, I knew I wanted to talk with her. We started with when the idea that Dominique would one day become a jazz singer first crystallized in her mind.
Maybe like all crystals, it kind of grew over time because I definitely loved singing when I was a kid, and I grew up in a musical household with lots of instruments and people studying piano. And I studied dance, but I also studied piano, and I just sang on my own a lot. And I wouldn't remember this if I didn't have the document to prove it, but in second grade, when the nuns in my Cardinal Spellman Catholic school said, "What do you want to be?" I drew myself as a singer with a microphone.
Tell our audience about a moment when the energy that you put into all this study and performance really came back to you, and you experienced an unforgettable moment of joy.
There are so many like that. And I think, the adrenaline that goes into performing shows that you have an expectation and a desire. And then when you make music with people, there's just feeling of mind meld that happens. The music takes over. And it's a very, very powerful feeling. It happens in collaboration with people. And I would point to one moment shortly after I moved to Boston, and I was playing with drummer Alan Dawson, who was legendary to me. I knew his drumming from recordings. And suddenly to find myself, playing an arrangement of something that I wrote with him and connecting with him, there's just nothing like that. And it's bigger than everybody on stage. It is, as you said, it's pure joy. Really pure joy.
Well, tell our audience about your repertoire so they know what to expect maybe at the Tucson Jazz Fest coming up.
I'm really looking forward to playing in Tucson. My husband is originally from Phoenix, and he was actually out just playing at the Nash, Alan Chase. But I've never sung in Arizona except to sit in with some people in Phoenix, some great folks there. So this time around, I'm going to be with pianist Armin Danilian, and he's been wintering out there in Tucson and has invited me to play with him. And we're going to be collaborating on a couple of compositions that he wrote, a couple of things that I wrote, and then beloved music from the jazz instrumental and Great American Songbook tradition, which we both revere.
Over the years, as you've found yourself choosing selections to put on your albums and things that you want in your set list, what have you learned about the qualities that appeal to you most from a composition? I mean, what is it over this song as opposed to that song that's going to make you want to sing it?
It comes at me many different ways. There are definitely pieces I've actually only seen the music to first. My Resistance is Low is one of those. Many songs have come that way, or I've heard an instrumentalist play them and I haven't heard the lyric, or I've heard a beloved singer sing them. So it really can be any number of things. And similar to what I was saying about the feeling of mind melding with people that you're playing with, this feeling of deep collaboration, that comes with music that you're working on as well, because, it's kind of like if you're reading a poem and suddenly you start to hear the poet's voice. And I can feel the composer's voice and the lyricist's voice, and I can be in dialogue with it and feel that I have something to say in this dialogue rather than just putting this song on in a particular way. You know, the songs in their own ways are really recordings of something, of a sentiment, of, you know, a particular place and time. And if you can channel that and it works with your chemistry, I think that's the power of interpretation and why we continue to find both new material that can convey this and also maybe very old songs that still are able to come through us and reach an expressiveness to the audience.
What is a song that you look forward to singing every time? What's something that keeps popping up in your set list, a song that you would consider to be an old friend?
There are a lot of standards that I actually haven't even recorded that I would say are big go-tos, and some of them Armin and I will be doing. Body and Soul is one. It's kind of a canvas. I just see it, and I don't have to think about anything. I can find a story to make and find my way musically through it. I think But Not For Me is another one. Yesterday's the Jerome Kern song. I feel like I always have a, point of departure with that. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll be doing that one as well. It's interesting that I haven't recorded. Maybe we're on to something. Maybe I need to make a record of all of these kinds of songs. But there is a song I recorded on a duo record with pianist Jed Wilson. It's called Home. I had a Helen Humes recording of it, but it was a little bit different. And suddenly I just heard a way to reharmonize it just a little. And that way of playing it, every time I go to sing it, it feels so solid to me.
Dominique, as the singer and the front person of the group playing on stage, do you also think of yourself as a band leader?
It depends on the situation. For instance, in Tucson, it will be very much a collaborative duo situation where we're collaborating on repertoire and talking things through. So it's very mutual. And I have a lot of long-standing collaborative duos, for instance, with pianist Rand Blake. But I've also led bands, for sure. I learned really early on that it's important to be both diplomatic and decisive. I co-led a really wonderful modern group with guitarist Mick Goodrick and some other wonderful players here in Boston, and I co-led it with flautist Jamie Baum, who is still playing and doing wonderful writing and playing. And we were younger and we didn't, we were amazed that these guys wanted to play with us and play our original music and rehearse every week. But there were moments when each one of us had we could end it this way or we could do that. And I remember one day Mick just looked at me and he said, pick one. That was just like a very, very, very good life lesson, because in being overly flexible and diplomatic, I was putting an onus and too much responsibility on him in that moment. But make a decision when a decision needs to be made, and it doesn't have to be the only decision, and you can change your mind. But clarity and respect are such golden things to learn in making music with people, regardless of whether you're the leader or not.
The duo of Dominique Eade and Armin Donillian will kick off the 2025 Tucson Jazz Festival next Friday, January 17th at the Century Room in downtown Tucson. You can find the schedule now on the Spotlight page at azpm.org and tune in next week to hear Delfeo Marsalis and some emerging local artists who will be part of the 2025 Tucson Jazz Festival. The music of the unique and iconoclastic Frank Zappa can be an acquired taste, but it offers many treasures to those who dare. No one knows this better than Dweezil Zappa, Frank's eldest son, who as part of his own 5-decade music career has learned to perform practically all of his dad's often hilarious, frequently serious, and notoriously complex music. When I heard that Dweezil was coming back to Tucson for a show, I knew I wanted to talk with him about how he uses his guitar like the sword of a mirthful samurai on a campaign for nonsense and sensibility. On this tour, Dweezil Zappa is celebrating 2 of his dad's classic albums.
That's right. It's a combination of the Roxy and Elsewhere and Apostrophe album. Both of those records came out in 1974. Of course, now it's the 51st anniversary of both of those albums. But those 2 records seem to be a really good way for people to experience my dad's music for the first time. They're kind of fan favorites because I think they're the most digestible, and there's so much variety between all the songs on both of those records.
I just saw recently an interview you did with a guy named Rick Beto that was on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
And I was real surprised by hearing you talk about how much you play, how much you practice and rehearse for the shows. I thought that by now I made the assumption that this would all be almost second nature to you. But you actually expressed that, it is rigorous.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's complicated to memorize, and keeping it playable on a technical level is something that you have to work on. I mean, it's the same as staying fit. If you can do 15 or 20 pull-ups and then you take a year off, good luck doing 15 or 20 pull-ups when you just want to go and get after it. It's not going to just happen. So the thing about my issues with the music is, at this point in time, I've learned so many different versions of the songs. It's hard to really, what ends up happening is it's like memorizing the phone book and then getting confused as to which page you're on. That's what happens. There's just so many things, and I can't keep all of it perfectly organized in my brain. And really the way that I end up being able to get through a show is it's muscle memory. It's really my hands going towards the right place on the neck, and then my brain saying, oh yeah, this is what comes next. Because I almost never have the ability to think about exactly what I'm doing and just go for it and do the thing, because it's so drilled in. So people have this idea that, oh, you grew up around it, it should be, easy, like riding a bike. But this music is never like that, and it's a tightrope act every time.
I'm looking over the track listings for the 2 albums that you're doing, and I know I've listened to these albums dozens, if not hundreds of times. I mean, some more than others, for sure. But there are titles on here that I'm like, I don't remember that. I don't know what song that is. But I'm sure if I heard it again, I would.
Right.
So even just being a listening fan of Zappa is strenuous.
Yeah, well, there's just so much. That's
your dad was amazingly
the statistical
prolific.
Density of it all is mind blowing. The fact that he wrote so much music and it's all so different, and it's never really simple 3-chord songs. It's one of the things that we're doing on this tour, which is interesting, is my uncle learned a song that my dad taught him when my dad was right after there was a period of time where some jackass got on stage and pushed my dad off the stage, and he got injured, and he was in a wheelchair for almost a year. And during that time, he was writing a lot of music, but he was able to play guitar, and my uncle could play guitar a little bit, and he was probably 18 at the time. This is around 1970. And he showed him a song, but the song never got recorded. But my uncle still remembers the parts. So I made a YouTube video of him teaching me the parts, and then I have taken all of those parts and made an arrangement of the song that is a brand new song. We're calling it the Lost Zappa song at the moment. It might end up with a different title one of these days, but it's a new piece of music that no one's ever heard. There's only 2 songs that I've ever co-written with my dad, and this would be one. And the other is a song called Dragon Master, which came out on my Via Zamata album. But that was a heavy metal song that he wrote some funny lyrics to and asked me to write the music to it.
Well, going back to what you said about your father's injury, and that time that he spent in the wheelchair, I believe I read in the book called The Real Frank Zappa Book that the first song that he recorded the vocals on after he was recovering was Pajama People. And I've always relished how deep and resonant his voice is on that song. Besides the lyrical content of that song, that's one of my favorite tracks.
It's a great tune. It's one of those songs that people always wonder about because my dad has some titles that are funny and writes about things that most people wouldn't sing about. But as far as I know, that song was about a couple of people in the band were usually not that interested in doing things that are typical rock and roll behavior. Mm-hmm. So they were the boring ones who would play cards and do stuff on the bus and backstage, and they were called the Pajama People.
Cozy little footies on their minds.
Yep.
A factoid that I learned about you in the book was Frank says that one of the first sentences that you spoke when you were a baby was, "What happened to the red car?" Did he tell you that story, or do you? I don't think you would remember it.
I don't really remember that story so much. I have read the book, but I don't remember exactly. I was always very interested in cars, and I remember at one point I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I was with magnets, and I was talking to my dad and saying, one day cars will be able to hover and ride on magnetic rails, because I was constantly playing with little toy cars, and I was thinking, well, it would be cool to have toy cars that could hover, and that was something that my dad was fascinated that I was having that kind of thought process.
Yeah, that's great. You got some good genes there.
Yes.
Dweezil Zappa will present an evening of full tilt rock's apostrophe Zappa music at the Rialto Theater on Sunday, January 12th. Check out the Spotlight page at azpm.org for a link. If you are of a certain age, you may well remember The Carol Burnett Show, a sketch comedy and variety television program that ran from 1967 to 1978. It featured Carol's deep love of the movies, with many hilarious parodies of Hollywood classics and friendly send-ups of the pop culture of the day. One of the standout players in Carol's small repertory company was Vicki Lawrence, who was then a teenager from California. Well, Vicki Lawrence is coming to the Fox Tucson Theater this weekend, and she's bringing a friend.
Well, hell, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood here, and I'd like to get on with it. So could we just get this over with? I got things to do.
Well, I was a huge fan letter writer when I was a kid, so I would preface the story with that. I think because my dad had a Time magazine cover collection of autographs, so I thought, well, that's a fun thing to do. But all the autographs I collected were all the cute young guys that were on television at the time, the Clint Eastwoods and the Bobby Shermans and the Monkees, and I had all their pictures and autographs. Carol, I was told that I looked like Carol from the day that I entered high school. And so my mom just urged me to write her a fan letter because it was like nonstop. And I entered a little contest my senior year, and the newspaper gal, when she was covering it, said that I looked like a young Carol Burnett. So my mom said, why don't you write that fan letter? I think I just told her I would love to meet her someday, that everybody said I looked like her. I enclosed that little article, which had a picture. And it happened to land on her desk before that contest. And her secretary back in the day was her cousin. We all called her Cuz. And she read the letter, and she said, Carol, you need to read this letter. So she did, and she called me on the phone and made arrangements to come and see that contest. She was, it just so happened, right in the throes of putting together the cast for the Carol Burnett Show. She and her husband had just moved out from New York to L.A., and were just starting to put the cast together. So it was just incredibly serendipitous timing. Never thought I would end up in show business. The only thing remotely showbiz that I loved was I thought it would be fun to be a rockette. I loved that. But I did do some drama in high school, and I was in every musical group on campus.
How did the other people that Carol had chosen to be in her cast, of course, the famous names, Harvey Korman, Tim Conway, Lyle Wagner, how did these guys accept you into their group? Did you feel welcomed by them? Were they dubious of having you on board?
No, everybody was really great. They would get maybe a little impatient with me once in a while, but Lyle was a very newcomer at the time. He was married to a Miss St. Louis, and they moved out to L.A. because he thought he wanted to be an actor. And the Burnett Show was his first big job and break.
Okay.
And he got the job through the audition process because of all the gorgeous men that she interviewed. He was the one with a sense of humor. So that's how he got his job.
Yeah.
Harvey, she tells a story about everybody sitting around, the producers and the director and the writers sitting around going, what we need to do is find a Harvey Korman type. And Carol said, well, has anybody asked him? No, everybody said no. Well, he had just finished the Danny Kaye show. It was right there at CBS. She caught Harvey in the parking lot one day going to his car from his office. And she said, I want you to be on my show. So that's how Harvey got the job. I don't know. It all just came. It's some sort of a magic thing. And it could not have happened to a more talented or a more special person than Carol.
Do you feel, though, that you became a repertory company quickly? Did things fall together cleanly for you? Because that seems like such a huge step for a young person to take, to be on that stage.
The only thing I did in the very beginning was the sketch that they had hired me for, which was to play her sister, loosely based on her life when she moved to New York and took her kid sister with her and raised her.
Yeah.
That's all I did, I think, for at least one whole season. And then I got a little part in a sketch they did about the newlywed game. And I was the wife of one of our kind of dorky-looking writers. And then Carol and Harvey were a couple. And it was a tiny little part, and I think their thinking was, if she's good, it's a stepping stone. If she's terrible, she's not going to ruin the sketch, because it wasn't a huge part. But that's where the bimbo came from on the Carol Burnett show. And I think they just slowly nurtured me and brought me along. There was no better place to learn. I mean, I always say I got to go to the Harvard School of Comedy in front of America. Harvey definitely took me under his wing. I think it was either kill me or train me, because he used to say, forget stage right and stage left, you can't even find the toilet. So he would, like I said, explain who I was in the movie takeoffs. He would help me with dialects and props and everything that I needed to learn. It was almost like having a private tutor. And I credit him with most everything I know about comedy. Because, Carol was busy. She had a show to run. And I'm sure I did learn a lot from her, but Harvey was really hands-on helping me learn. Well, not literally hands-on, but you know what I mean.
Well, that's good to know. Yes. So, Vicki, what do you remember most about the first time you put on the wig and the baggy hose and became Mama?
First off, Bob Mackie is a genius. And he has an incredible sense of humor. And if you haven't seen his documentary, I highly recommend it. It's really good. Naked Illusion, it's called, I believe. There were many times that I didn't know who I was in a sketch until I saw Bob. And we started on Mondays. Wardrobe was always Wednesday morning. And there were many times that he would dress me, and I'd go, oh, now I see who I am. So Mama was, no exception. He built the body in a slip. He had the dress, the shoes, the socks, the purse, the sweater, the wig, the glasses, everything. And he used to kind of stand in front of you while he was getting you dressed. And when he stepped aside, there I was in the mirror. I went, well, there she is. There she is. Good Lord. Yeah.
I got to interview Carol Burnett about 8 years ago, maybe. And I had to confess to her that as a child, I was very disturbed by the sketches. I called them the Eunice sketches back then. Because it was so sad to me that the three main characters they never listened to each other. They were always complaining and always upset, but nobody ever listened. Nobody ever offered condolences or apologies or anything. It just escalated. And I think growing up in a house with poor communication, those sketches depressed me. And Carol confided in me that they kind of depressed her too. And I just want to know what your reaction to that is. And with all apologies, because it is humor. And later the character was greatly softened. And, Mama's Family was a totally different animal than those original sketches.
It was.
Yeah,
it was. The Carol Burnett show was really Eunice's family. I think it just really reminds everybody of the dysfunction in their family. And it's probably good to laugh at it because it reminds you that you're not the only one going through it. So for a lot of people, it's been very healing, those sketches, I think. But yes, the endings especially were usually some of them very sad. Carol used to say she thought a great acting class would be to take one of those sketches and do it completely straight like a drama. And she said it would play. They would. And they were little playlets, Sometimes they would take up the whole half of the show.
Well, when you mention the fact that Mama isn't afraid to speak her mind, I have always attributed that as a quality that comes from you, Vicki. I remember with great pleasure my grandmother and I watching TV and really enjoying you sparring with Dick Clark on the $64,000 pyramid.
I miss him.
Yeah,
I really miss him.
Did you guys work that out backstage, or did that just happen when you were playing the game?
No, he would just always say the wrong thing, and he'd get in trouble for it. He'd call me Carol, or he'd, come up with the perfect answer, and I'd go, well, that's great, thanks a lot. And, he just said things that I would get upset about, and it turned into a thing. So it was kind of fun for us to do it.
You would get visibly irritated by the fact that he did have the answers.
Yes, I would. I miss him. I miss doing that. Carol and I were on one week. We were on Password together, and she said, I want us to do it as Mama and Eunice. I said, what? She said, I want us to dress up and do the show. I said, but we want to win. How are we going to win if we're dressed up in character? She said, you can do it. We can do it. I was really nervous, but she was right. It ended up being very funny, and we were in character the whole way.
An evening of laughter, stories, and song, Vicki Lawrence and Mama, a two-woman show, will be at the Fox Tucson Theater on Saturday, January 11th. My advice is not to disappoint Mama. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. The assistant producer is Sophia Hammer. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.